Guys, this is Charlotte with part 2 of weathering my first freight car. So in this one, we're going to go a little bit farther and finish it up. We're going to do the ends of the car. We're going to do the hatches and the walkway. We're going to do the trucks, the wheels. So lots of good stuff in this video. As you can see, these are some of the products that I used. So stick around and here we go. So as you can see, starting out here, we are doing underneath the walkways on the top. I'm using 2 different colors of paint here, more of a rusty color and then kind of like a dirty gray color. So I'm just kind of going over it with the rusty color, just painting a straight coat across the top. And as you can see, I'm trying to avoid painting the hatches right now. We'll get those a little bit later on. I'm also trying to avoid painting the walkways, so those are going to be a little bit different of color. So just make sure you're really careful when going around the hatches and the walkway, just to make sure you avoid getting paint on those, since we will be doing those a little bit different colored. Alright, so after you get that first coat on there with that rusty color, adding a little bit of that dark gray, we are going to go over with some powders. So I chose a dark rust, so it's kind of a dark red color, but I'm just going to brush that over it, kind of add a little more depth and color into that rusty top there. See there, that rust colored chalk did add a little bit of a difference to that color at the top, give it a little bit more definition. And just as a kind of side note here, if you do not have a hobby store near you that sells the kind of pre-done chalks like I have there, you can also always go to like a arts or crafts store, and if they have chalk for art pieces, this would be a good way to make your own chalk. So if you just have an X-Acto knife, you can just kind of scrape some of that chalk off there and make your own chalk with it. So you can always mix the different colors just to get the perfect color, but that's just a little side note if you don't have a hobby store, like I said. So especially that orange and that brown that I have there, those are good rust colors. So. Guys, so as you can see, I went a little bit crazy on the sides with the rust color. I was just going to throw a CSX patch over it and kind of just have it at that, but I decided that I did want to just stick with the chassis. So here I have some thinner, and I used a Q-tip, and I took the thinner to kind of try to start taking off some of what I had done, kind of some reverse weathering. and I actually love the result that I had. So I started out just doing the graffiti part just to kind of make those pop a little bit more, and then I kind of continued on with the car. See there, I did take off some of that grime and kind of rust color that I had over that decal and made it pop a little bit more. Okay, so then I kind of went back here and tried to take some of the rust off because I overdid it a little bit. So just referencing back to what I said in my first video, not really good at taking my own advice, but you can always add more, but you can't take it off. In this case, I was able to take some of it off, thankfully. Looked a lot better. So as you can see here, progress. So you see a little bit of the yellow coming through, and then I will continue on and take more off, and it ends up looking pretty well. But we'll kind of takes a little bit of elbow grease and a lot of time to do this. So I don't know if I would recommend this method. Maybe just, you know, start off by not putting a crap ton on there. So if you decide to do my backwards method here and you just coat everything with a heavier coat and then go back and remove it, I will say just make sure you're kind of focusing on taking the majority off towards the bottom, because you still want to keep that grade down of doing the darker stuff at the top and then going lighter at the bottom, just like a natural rusting would go. Looks 100 times better, so it's not all overly rusted like I had it before, where I would have to just throw a CSX patch on it and call it a day. So you can actually see the good old yellow from the chassis there. It's rusted at the top, looks great. And so now we are going to go ahead and move on. So here I am using some oil paint, so we're going to work on the top of the car now. So we're going to work on those hatches and those walkways. So I mixed my oil paints with a little bit of that thinner, just kind of thin it out, make it a little bit better of a wash instead of just doing a straight paint with it. So as you can see, we kind of have that light rust color there that I'm laying over the tops of the walkways. So nothing super crazy and dark. I did do that same color over the hatches, so it's pretty light. So I went back through and did one more layer across the walkways with that rusty orange color, just because I wanted to do a little bit darker. Thought it would look a little more realistic with that. So as you can see here, I am adding in a new color, some raw umber. I'm also still using that light rust color with the oil paints, mixing those two together with a little bit of thinner to create my wash for the ends. So when you're doing the ends of your train, just make sure you're really getting it in there, getting it into all the little creases. You know, the dirt's gonna get everywhere. So especially sometimes around the smaller parts, make sure you kind of get it caked in there and maybe a little bit darker in those parts, as the dirt would stick there more. Alrighty, so as you can see, I finished my ends there, so you can see it's a little bit of a dark wash over those. Try to get a little bit darker around those little edges there where the dirt would stick. And then I did once again go back over my walkways on the top. Apparently I really just like making things dark, as you can see here, because I continually go back over, but it turned out well with this one. Ta-da! And there we go. So we have a little bit darker color there on the hatches and the walkways. Next we are going to be working on the trucks. So here I'm struggling to pop the wheel out, as one does. There we go. Alright, so now we have the wheel separated. I'm going to grab the other one, struggle again. And there we go. As you can see here, I have this handy dandy little tool that helps it so that I don't paint the flanges. That way we keep a clean color on the wheels. I had a friend lend this to me because they saw how I struggled in the first video, so it turned out it was very helpful. And I forgot to tape the part where I did go back and do the back sides of the wheels. I did do a layer of paint on those. So just so you know, you do want to paint the front and the backs of the wheels to make it look more realistic. Okay, so as you can see, we're just going over, just doing one coat, trying to kind of avoid those little spokes there, painting those. product. So we'll be adding some powder onto these a little bit later on, but that's just one layer of paint just to kind of get a base color on there. Okay, and now I'm using that same color. I'm just doing one layer of paint on the truck just to give it a little bit of more of a dirty used look. Okay, so here is where we get into the powders with the wheels. So we did use that dark rust and that dark rail brown. So I'm using a mix of those on the wheels now that the paint layer has dried. Just going back over those, making it look a little more realistic, giving a little more depth and character to it. So I did go ahead and do a dull coat over the wash that we had did previously on the ends. So I'm just going back in with those powders again. I did mostly use that dark rail brown on the ends of this just to give it a little more dirty look. The dust does stick a lot better after the dull coat, so just keep that in mind. But again, you can go pretty heavy with the dust. A lot of it falls off. But I wanted to make sure kind of get towards the bottom and where it's going to be handled more in real life. You want to get that a little bit darker there, make it look more realistic. Do some powders on the top again, so I went over those hatches and over the walkways with some of that dark brown, kind of add a little more character, a little more depth to it. Alright guys, so this is the finished product. So I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Since I did royally mess it up in the beginning towards the middle, but I fixed it. It looks much better. I'm actually more happy with the product that I have now than what I had with before. So as you can see on the left side there at the end, I did break a piece off there, and I tried to make it a little more realistic. So I took a little piece of like a plastic material and tied it on there as a flag. Just kind of as a way to notify that that piece is broken and not to use that section. So you can always make the train your own, so even if it's not the standard modeling, You can be like me and get a little creative with it. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is the other side of the train now. So as you can see, this side also turned out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the streaking on this end. I think it looked really good. Again, with the decals, I'm not super happy with how they turned out. I feel like after I went back with the thinner, they really stuck out, especially that one, that Michelle there on the right hand side. I feel like it sticks out a lot. So I'm definitely going to try to maybe do some hand graffiti in the future if I get good enough, or maybe look for some different type of decals to put on there, or a different way to do it. That way it doesn't stand out so much that it is a decal that I placed on there. But all in all, I think for my first modeling job, I am really happy with it. I hope you guys learned something. I sure learned a lot, especially to take my own advice. So if you guys, again, have any advice or tips for me, please leave them in the comments. I look forward to reading them, and I appreciate you guys supporting me and continuing to help me with my journey here, and I look forward to doing more videos for you guys in the future. Thank you.